How should the Panthers address the interior of their defensive line this offseason? I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show right here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with a bet on FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. We continue our series of looking at every single position group here in Carolina and discussing how the Panthers should address them this offseason. We talk about the offense over the last couple of weeks. The next 2 weeks, let's focus on the defense, starting with the interior of the Panthers' defensive line, which was a major question mark in 2024, and Derrick Brown was out for the entirety of the season, at least the majority of the season, with a torn meniscus, and then last year became a far better position group as they added Bobby Brown III, Turk Wharton. Of course, Derrick Brown came back from injury, and A'Shawn Robinson was back for his second year in Carolina. So we're going to discuss what they should do this offseason to handle this position group. One big question I have is A'Shawn Robinson. Could he potentially be a cap casualty here in Carolina? But let's take a look at just how things currently stand with this position group. And looking at the guys under contract, there were a lot of dudes who are supposed to be back this upcoming season on the interior of the Panthers defensive line. You got Derrick Brown, A'Shawn Robinson, Turk Wharton, Bobby Brown III, Cam Jackson, Jared Harrison Hunt as well, and Popo Amave. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys currently under contract. When looking at the other position groups we talked about so far, there have not necessarily been that many guys, even offensive line, that are under contract that are expected to be significant contributors again this upcoming season. Of course, were last year and in years prior. So looking at those 7, Derrick Brown obviously is the biggest name of them all and is a cornerstone player for this organization and is not going anywhere anytime soon in Carolina, considering where they're at in the stage of this rebuild, where they went to the playoffs last year. He reiterated what a lot of guys said in the locker room that Sunday after that loss against the Rams during locker room cleanout, saying this is the standard now. They are a playoff team. They expect to continue being a playoff team. And he also was still pretty chapped about not being a Pro Bowler and knowing how good he is. And if guys don't believe he's that good, well, they'll find out every single Sunday moving forward. So he is one of the best interior defensive linemen in the NFL. He is one of the best players, if not the best player on this roster. We'll be back again this upcoming season. It'll be the second year of a 4-year, $96 million contract extension he signed prior to the 2024 season when he's going to play on the 5th-year option. $13 million of his 2026 salary is fully guaranteed as of March 14th of 2025. So he's already good there. He has an additional $5.15 million of his 2026 salary that fully guarantees on the 3rd league day of the new year coming up here. March 11th is day 1 of free agency in the new league year at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So by day 3, he'll be on the roster. He'll get $5.15 million more. So he'll have $18.15 million guaranteed in 2026. He does carry a pretty hefty cap number of $24.5 million. The Panthers don't have any recourse as far as cutting him, which you wouldn't want to do anyways. But there's not too many things they can do necessarily to open up some cap space this offseason with Derrick Brown other than extending him or restructuring, which does not appear to be something this organization wants to do. When you look at his cap hits moving forward, it only goes up. So if you want to try to kick the can down the road next year, it's going to likely be in the $30 million range. And then after that, it may, if you keep kicking it down, get to the $40 million range. And that's not necessarily what you're trying to do with Derrick Brown. So that cap number, it's going to be high next year, going to be high the year after that. And they really don't have much of a chance to get out of the deal, which I don't know why they would want to, until next offseason in 2027, then the year after that in 2028, where they could save $18 million and $24 million respectively over the next 2 off seasons. But again, Derrick Brown, one of the best players on your team, one of the leaders of your team, and a guy that you want to continue to build around. So that's where he sits with his contract right now. So yeah, they're going to have to find a way just as the cap evolves and as this roster evolves, to maybe find a way to mitigate some of his cap numbers. But that's what it is. And there's going to be some other guys like when Bryce Young, if he does eventually get a big time deal, I know next year, at least the 5th year option, it's going to be pretty hefty. And JC Horn's a part of that group as well. How does Brant Tillis, the EVP of football operations who handles salary cap and contracts here in Carolina, how will he handle some of these deals moving forward? But Derrick Brown, he's here to stay. Second year of 4-year, $96 million contract extension come up here in 2026. A'Shawn Robinson is in the final year of a 3-year, $22.5 million deal. The only guaranteed money he could have, which he has no guarantees at all going to this year. The only money necessarily you can make as far as a bonus is an active per game bonus of $45,000. If he's active all 17 games next season, $765,000 will be owed to him. The Panthers, though, they have some recourse here as far as trying to open up some money this offseason. $10.5 million they could save by releasing him with a $2 million cap hit. So that makes it a very interesting conversation considering where the Panthers stand cap-wise heading into the new league year. We'll talk about that momentarily as far as it pertains to A'Shawn Robinson. Turk Wharton, he's coming into year 2 of a 3-year deal, $45 million that he's owed. 2026 compensation is guaranteed per game active bonus, $30,000. He can make up to $510,000 if he's active every single game. Then he has performance incentives, Pro Bowl, $500,000, 7 sacks, $500,000, 10 sacks, $500,000. Did not get close to any of those his first season in Carolina, missing a lot of time, either with a hamstring injury. Believe he dealt with a calf as well. So hopefully for Turk and the Panthers this upcoming season, he'll be healthy more often than not, as that was an issue for him in his first year. The Panthers can't get out of his deal this offseason. He is here for this season. And after this year, potentially they could move on from him, as they could save $14.8 million next offseason if they want to move on from him. But this year they would lose, I believe, by $5 million if they cut Turk Wharton. So Turk Wharton is here to stay for this upcoming season and be a starter yet again and a massive contributor along the defensive front. Bobby Brown III enters year 2 of a 3-year contract that was worth $21 million. Only $2.775 million of his 2026 salary is guaranteed. He does, like the rest of these guys, have a per game active bonus, $30,000. That is the same as Turk, so $510,000 if he is healthy and able to be active every single game this upcoming season. He does have incentives. If he plays 42.5% of snaps, that's $500,000. 50% of snaps is another $500,000. He did not come close to either one of those this past season. So the hope is that he would be someone who would be a bigger participant this upcoming year for Carolina if he went well. He's going to be on the roster. Well, I guess there is a kind of a question of whether he would or not, but likely on the roster again this upcoming fall. So those are really the contracts to look at. Cam Jackson, 2nd year of a rookie deal, drafted in the 5th round last year out of Florida. Jared Harrison-Hunt, he's on a UDFA deal, undrafted free agent, so he's got 2 more years left on that. Popo Amave was someone who was injured, I believe it was back in 2024, and was waived by Carolina, but then was back on the roster, and then they had to put him on IR for 2025. So he's back around again, trying to fight for a roster spot. Likely will be fighting to be on the practice squad, but really Derrick Brown, A'Shawn Robinson, Turk Wharton, Bobby Brown III, and Cam Jackson are the guys that we're really focused on heading into this upcoming season. And then LaBryan Ray, as far as free agents that are pending, he is a restricted free agent. So Carolina can offer him a restricted free agency tender based off of like what his draft slot was, which I don't believe he was drafted, and his service years. And they can offer him that, and he can sign it, and he could come back to Carolina. Now, there are teams in the NFL that could offer him an offer sheet. If he signs it, Carolina then would have the ability to either say, yes, we'll match, or no, go ahead, you can go to that new team. I'm guessing considering where they're at right now, I don't know why there would be that much interest in LaBryan Ray. Now, it seems like this organization does like the players, so possibly they decide to give him a small offer sheet. I don't know how many teams out there are really going to be fighting Carolina for his signature, so they could do that. And then it makes it Derrick Brown, A'Shawn Robinson, Turk Wharton, Bobby Brown III, and Cam Jackson. And if they do, maybe we'll have to figure out what they do prior to that, because there is a situation as far as A'Shawn Robinson's contract and the salary cap stands right now that could make a lot more sense for Carolina to want to offer a restricted free agent tender to LaBryan Ray. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years, and that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts of individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling matches that start slow and somehow get fast, speed skating races decided by inches, hockey games that feel different right from the opening faceoff, even niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Is A'Shawn Robinson in jeopardy of being a cap casualty for the Panthers as they head into the new league year on Wednesday, March 11th at 4 p.m. Eastern time? Looking at overthecap.com, they are projecting Carolina to have $14.4 million of salary cap space. And obviously that is not nearly enough for Carolina to want to do all the things they want to do this upcoming off season. It's not just looking at signing the draft class, but it's also having some flexibility in season. And, of course, taking care of some free agent signings that I think are necessary at certain positions for them to address. Talk about all those offensively last week in our state of the Panthers offense, off-season edition. And, of course, when talking about the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, offensive line, respectively, over the course of the last 2 weeks here on Locked On Panthers. Check out those shows on YouTube and, of course, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. But, again, $14.4 million of salary cap space, according to overthecap.com. That is what Carolina's projected. The salary cap has not been finalized yet by the NFL, although the reports came out that $20 million of increased salary cap space, at least that will be the case. There's a wide range of what it could be. And the Panthers, like all teams, will have a plan for if it's going to be on the lower end of the scale, to the middle part, to the high end of the scale. They'll know how they may have to handle things. And whether it's the low end or the high end, they may need to move on from A'Shawn Robinson, who, if you look at it, the last 2 years of him in Carolina, in 2024, when DB was out for the majority of the season after being injured there against New Orleans in week 1, you saw A'Shawn Robinson was really the only reliable defensive lineman on that roster. Guys like LaBryan Ray struggled. Deshaun Williams, when he was here, struggled. And a lot of younger, inexperienced players did not play to the kind of standard that people become accustomed to from that defensive tackle spot in Carolina, outside of A'Shawn Robinson, who in his first year had to be the top guy there. Shai Tuttle, he also was not what Carolina needed him to be that season, what A'Shawn was. And I think this past year, A'Shawn played even better because he had Derrick Brown, because he had Bobby Brown III, because he had Turk Wharton as well. The talent level around him allowed him to just play his role, play less snaps, and to be a more productive player. So you look at it, Derrick Brown, clearly best player in that position group. Then it was A'Shawn Robinson. You look at the PFF numbers, we went over these a couple of weeks ago when looking at Turk and at Bobby Brown III. The numbers haven't really been good for them. They weren't good for them this past year, and that's really only one way to look at it. But you look at some of the rushing totals that opponents had when Turk Wharton played and when he didn't play. Clearly, there's something there. The sack numbers are not near what they were back when he was in Kansas City the year prior and even before that. So an area you would expected him to help elevate. He did not necessarily do that this past year, while Derrick Brown had his best year getting to the quarterback as a Panther. And then you look at Bobby. He didn't play that many snaps. When he did play, he was okay, but it wasn't like he was a difference maker at all for Carolina. And yeah, he came in as a rotational guy. Turk was more of a starter than Bobby was this past season. But neither one of those guys, in my opinion. And when you look even at PFF and some other areas, so just address and evaluate defensive linemen, they were clearly behind Derrick Brown by a large margin. They were behind A'Shawn Robinson. So if you're Carolina, do you want to move off of the guy who's been your best defensive tackle back in 2024 when Derrick was out, and then your second best defensive tackle this past season in 2025? But when you look at the salary cap, again, $14.4 million, and know that you really don't have any flexibility with Derrick's contract. If you look at, do you really want to restructure and cause more issues as far as salary cap goes in the future? Probably not, especially when you don't know what's going to happen with your quarterback past next year. And then you also look at the fact that offensive line like Ike Ekwonu likely going to deal with his contract. There's other guys offensive line wise like Damian Lewis, like Rob Hunt, especially have big salary cap hits. J.C. Horn. You don't really have a ton you can do there with Derrick Brown, in my opinion. Now, obviously, Brant Tillis understands the cap and what they need to do a lot better than I do. I'm just looking at it from someone who just looks at this, talks about it a lot here on the podcast, and I don't really know what they could do there in that situation. So not much you can do with Derrick Brown. Turk, you lose money if you move on from him. Bobby, we'll talk about him momentarily. But yeah, man, like just try to open up some space to do some things. You may have to move off. And again, it's $10.5 million if they release A'Shawn Robinson, where it would be then a $2 million cap, a dead cap hit. So not anything that's going to kill you at all as far as dead money. Now, restructuring his contract, that may be something people are going to ask about. Can you do that? According to overthecap.com, $0 is opened up by doing that. So it's either they cut him or they potentially can extend him, and that would clear up to $6.7 million of salary cap space. Now, when you have two guys like Bobby and like Turk under contract again next season, do you want to extend A'Shawn Robinson? When you just drafted someone like Cam Jackson, do you want to extend him? And like, here's the thing, they could absolutely move on, clear that $10.5 million cap space, have Derrick come back, have Turk, who's already a starter, come back, have Bobby maybe ascend to be a starter. And then Cam Jackson, they just drafted him last year. So they had in mind, eventually, this is going to be someone that they would like to be a key part of that rotation. And by removing A'Shawn Robinson and in turn saving money, he then can be that. And you also look at a LaBryan Ray. He could also come in if they want to offer that restricted free agent tender. That could save them some money there too, where they're not paying A'Shawn, at least salary cap wise, as much as they would have when you look at with LaBryan Ray. So they could save the money, take on some dead cap, which is $2 million, nothing crazy at all, and allow Cam Jackson to step into a bigger role and have LaBryan Ray step in there as well. Do they get better in that situation? Probably not. But you sometimes have to weaken certain positions in order to be in a good cap position in order to go out there and to get some of the guys you need to improve your roster in totality. And I think that would help defensively would be better linebacker play, maybe adding another safety. So this is a group where you look at 7 guys already under contract, another one you could very easily bring back in LaBryan Ray, and you wonder, do you need to have these kind of numbers at defensive tackle when you're paying Derrick Brown as much as you're paying him? And then you did give both Turk Wharton, especially, and then Bobby Brown III, some decent contracts last offseason. Now, Bobby's another potential cut option. If you look at it, they could save $4.3 million if they decide to move on from him, where there would be a $3.6 million dead cap hit. So not a ton of savings and not really that much of a dead cap hit as far as that goes. I would guess they just kind of ride with him. And if I were to choose from Carolina, and as far as you like the player, who would you rather have? You'd rather have A'Shawn than Bobby, but A'Shawn's cap situation is obviously dramatically different right now than Bobby's cap situation. So that has to come into play when having these discussions. So that could be another way to open it up. I don't think they would move on from both those guys. That to me would not make a lot of sense at all, because then it's just basically where you were a couple of years ago with just Derrick and then Turk as the only really experienced guy there with him. If you moved on from both Bobby and from A'Shawn Robinson, which will unlikely to really be a discussion point. But A'Shawn Robinson, that seems to me to be way too obvious of a guy that you move on from. Even if you want him around, you want to open up some cap space, be able to take care of some of the other spots on this roster this offseason. So how should the Panthers handle the interior defensive line this offseason? I'll tell you that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on for your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2, self-employed forms, and work to get you every deduction. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take your taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. So how should the Panthers handle the offseason at the defensive tackle position? I think the easiest thing for them to do and the most obvious thing for them to do, considering the cap situation, is to release A'Shawn Robinson. I do not necessarily believe that this makes the team better immediately when they do that. I obviously know that Derrick Brown, and we all know that Derrick Brown is the best player on this roster, potentially, and certainly the best player on the defense and at that interior defensive line position. And you brought in guys like Turk and like Bobby to make an impact, much like Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis made in 2024 with the offensive line. They wanted to see that with the defensive line and did not necessarily get that kind of production from either one of those guys a year ago. But this would then allow Turk and Bobby especially to play more snaps. It also allow Cam Robinson, who they just drafted out of Florida the year prior, an opportunity to play more snaps this upcoming season. They could bring back a guy like LaBryan Ray, and it could also not preclude them from, if they felt like it, drafting another interior defensive lineman in this cycle. And if they want to get somebody maybe in the second round, that person could come in and immediately help out. But there are other areas of need on this roster, and I would not say that defensive line, defensive tackle in particular, is one of them. And this is going to be an organization that wants to pride itself on development. And, well, have you developed Cam Jackson? Have you developed Jared Harrison Hunt, the undrafted free agent at SMU, enough to the point where those guys can come in next year and be prime contributors behind Derrick Brown, behind Turk Wharton, and behind Bobby Brown III? If so, then the loss of Ashawn is not going to be one that really sets his team back. And I don't think it was going to set the team back anyways, but I do think that salary cap-wise, he is one of the obvious position group guys to look at and say, okay, move off of him. You already have 3 experienced guys already in that room, some young guys who can step up, another experienced player, LaBryan Ray, you can bring back to where that can mitigate the loss there of Ashawn Robinson, who certainly, in my mind, I'm sure in the organization's mind, is not an irreplaceable player, but obviously a player you probably don't want to move off of if the salary cap situation wasn't what it was and if his contract structure was not where it's at this point in time. But again, who signed him the contract? Brent Tillis. He negotiated with Ashawn and Ashawn Robinson's agent, and he knew he'd have this kind of flexibility if the Panthers needed to be where they were in the situation where they're at right now, to where they need salary cap space. And this is why you have a guy like Brent Tillis in order to figure things like this out. So they do that. Other than that, man, there's not really a ton else I feel like they need to do. Like Derrick Brown, I don't think there's much you can do with his deal. He's coming back. Turk, nothing you can do there. Bobby, you could move off of him. I don't necessarily think that's what they need to do right now. And as far as drafting someone, it's never a bad strategy to keep drafting hog mollies, as Dave Gettleman called them. Never bad to continue to invest on both lines of scrimmage. I would think that offensive line is key area that they need to address this offseason as far as the draft goes. And defensive tackle, they want to get another one on day 3. By all means, go ahead and do it. They've done it 2 years in a row where they drafted Jaden Crumedy in the 6th round back in 24. And then last year, of course, getting Cam Jackson in the 5th round. Do they want to invest heavier or I guess more by getting someone in the 3rd or 4th round this upcoming draft in Pittsburgh in April? We'll see. Like, those are the only things I could see them really doing at this point in time, considering the numbers at that position group as far as bodies in the room and as just far as the contract situations for a lot of these guys who are coming back next year, at least under contract at this recording, and those, at least the one in LaBryan Ray, that are restricted free agents. Not too much that can really happen on the interior of the Panthers defensive line this offseason. So we'll monitor it here, obviously, on Locked On Panthers. But that's going to wrap up this edition of Locked On Panthers podcast for our Locked On Podcast Network. Hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and over on Blue Sky at Julian Council, where next week, the weekly Friday mailbag is back. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all tomorrow. I'll take a look at the edge rushers. Now, the Panthers will address that position, or at least should address that position this offseason, here on Wednesday on Locked On Panthers.